It seems like any major city in the world eventually gets a metro system of its own. It's almost like a status symbol kind of thing, to show that the area has grown into a real metropolis. Well, no metro system exists in the Baltic states, at least not yet. While Riga, Latvia and Tallinn, Estonia have tram systems, there aren't any cities across these three countries that have metros. Focusing on Lithuania, however, this was a plan for its capital city, Vilnius, but it's something that largely seems to have been forgotten, at least for now. Anyone who has lived or worked in Lithuania's capital city may know that it has had some bad traffic issues at certain times of the day. Some will also tell you that it has a bad public transportation system, although it really depends on where you're going, the time of day, and how often you use it. But did you know that Vilnius has been debating a metro system of its own for a few decades now? Yep, in the early 2000s there were studies to see if Vilnius could or should have a metro system of its own. Here's a proposed map that you can find on Wikipedia. As you can see, there would have been 3 different lines. The blue one would have run from the airport into the city, across the river, and northwest out to the Pašilaičiai neighborhood. The green was supposed to go from the central bus and train station area in this large C shape, connecting spots like the large hospital in Lazdynė, the TV tower in Karoliniškės, some of the other outlying northern neighborhoods, and finally, it would end at this stop called University, which I believe is the location of Vilnius Gediminas Technical University. And then finally, the yellow line would have served the Naujamiestis neighborhood and run out to Santariškės, the major hospital and health complex area. A Delphi article from 2007 adds more detail, saying that 2 lines would intersect in the city center on Konstitucijos Avenue, while another proposed line would have run between the White and Iron Wolf bridges. Sources state that this proposal dates back to 2001, when then-mayor of Vilnius, Artūras Zuokas, requested international support for a feasibility study of the proposed system. The proposal was approved as part of the city's master plan by the Vilnius Municipal Council in 2002. By 2007, the project was being intensely debated by both politicians and citizens. Cost and disruption were the biggest concerns. The 2007 Delphi article noted that all 3 metro lines were estimated to have a cost of about 3 billion litas. This would have been nearly €1 billion, which is probably closer to 1.5 billion euros in today's money. Of course, with most of these major projects often going over budget, there's a good chance any estimate would have been quickly surpassed, but that's my own guess. As for disruption, I'm sure it's easy to imagine just how much inconvenience there would be to install a major 3-line metro system, especially if it's running under the historic Old Town. It was also mentioned that there were concerns over possible vibrations that could damage historic buildings in Vilnius Old Town, which is not an unreasonable thing to be concerned about. Vilnius mayor at that time, Juozas Imbras, was stated to be on the fence about having a metro. He was previously clearly for the metro, but later declared that he was more neutral between a metro and a tram system. Discussions will continue for a long time, and in the meantime we have to worry about improving the existing transport system, Imbras said to Delphi. Well, I'm guessing the 2008 financial crisis had a role to play in stopping any more progress from happening. But fast forwarding about a decade, by 2018 the proposed metro lines had changed to look like this. This map doesn't seem to even touch the Old Town, and doesn't run out to the airport. Instead, there's a circular line with 2 other lines. Most of these are north of the Neris River, with stations at the Green Bridge and King Mindaugas Bridge being the closest to the historic city center. In 2014, legislation was passed by Parliament that would allow for private investment into such a large-scale metro project. The president at the time, Dalia Grybauskaitė, actually vetoed this law, rejecting it and proposing amendments. On October 9, 2018, the government again adopted the Metropolitan Implementation Law, which again created conditions for private investors to undertake subway construction. And again, President Grybauskaitė vetoed it, sending it back to Parliament for changes. The president highlighted that the law classified the metro as a type of railway transport, which contradicts the legal regulation of the metro in force in the EU. According to the president, or at least her spokesperson, the law wasn't clear who was responsible for future losses, either the state or the municipality. The project is expensive. We are talking about hundreds of millions of euros. It would affect both the state debt and the deficit, because such a project would probably require borrowing. For the state, that is, for all municipalities, for all the people of Lithuania, it can be painful to take responsibility and such a burden. This is what the president's advisor said to the media. The law was sent back for revision and passed in January 2020, and again, this created conditions for building the metro with private funds. As Made in Vilnius explained in their article, it is often believed that the subway is an object that imposes a large financial burden on the city, but the adopted law provides for the possibility of building the subway at the expense of a private investor. In this case, the budget will only be filled with additional income through various taxes. But it's been 4 years, and nothing has progressed, at least at the time of making this video. I did find this pro-metro video by the Lithuanian Construction Association and a few more opinion pieces, but that's about it. Now, I'm guessing again that the pandemic had a huge part to play in killing the momentum of this project, and maybe plans will begin again soon, only to be once again paused by some major crisis. I don't know. But to have a Vilnius metro or not? That's the big question. One media source notes that supporters of the metro argue that if Vilnius decided to build a metro, it would open up hundreds of millions of euros worth of investments, and it would free Vilnius up from traffic jams. However, on the other side, opponents of the subway say that the construction will not pay off, the subway will be expensive, and few people will use it, and construction will damage historical structures. People against the metro also argue that there are more convenient and cheaper modes of transportation. According to that Made in Vilnius article from 2020, there are over 10 cities the size of Vilnius and smaller that are successfully operating and expanding metro networks. The smallest of these mentioned at the time were Lausanne, which had about 140,000 residents, Rennes, 222,000, and Lille, with 237,000 residents. Now, I come from Vancouver, which is a city with a pretty extensive metro system called the SkyTrain. It's extensive, but it's also expensive. Some of the system is underground, while some of it is elevated. A 2018 article that I found highlighted that costs for building the SkyTrain went from 68 million Canadian dollars per kilometer for one of its lines to 121 million per kilometer for a subsequent line, and then a crazy 491 million Canadian dollars per kilometer for the line that's currently being built. Now, I think some of this will probably be cheaper in Lithuania, as there might be less disruption in the outer areas. But yeah, I present all this information just to demonstrate that it's a pretty expensive undertaking. Some will argue that the city is just too small for a metro system, as in the number of residents and the population. But I would argue that it's a project that creates opportunities for growth. And I think in most cases, commercial areas and business centers often pop up near the stations. Additionally, I think it's a way to address the traffic problems of the future before they have the chance to become really bad traffic problems. I guess for me, I'm on the fence about it. I think there could be other ways to provide public transportation that don't have such a huge price tag, but then at the same time, an underground metro could reduce the number of buses on some roads and be a more comfortable option in the wintertime. And maybe if I were to go really dark with this, underground stations could double as bomb shelters in a worst case scenario. Actually, after I wrote this bit and then looked for a few more articles, I discovered I wasn't the only person thinking about it. So I guess I don't feel so bad for bringing it up. But again, the cost is high, and will Vilnius residents be willing to pay the high cost of a metro ticket? Or will they instead choose other forms of transportation, like the bus or Bolt scooter or Bolt taxi, or their own private vehicles? I think if we had more buses, and then these buses had more of their own exclusive lanes, we could solve a lot of the current public transportation issues. But that's just me. And so what do you think? Does Vilnius need its own metro system? Particularly if it's going to cost a lot of money. Why or why not? Let me know by leaving a comment. So if you found this video interesting and want to support my work in making more videos about Lithuania, please consider becoming a Patreon patron. Members get early access to videos along with other perks. There's a link to my Patreon page down in the video description. Thanks again for watching.